Hello, my name is Louise. I'm 31 years old and a secondary school teacher from County Monaghan. I'm the youngest of 6 children and I was brought up in a Catholic family. Growing up, I attended Mass weekly with my parents and we prayed the family rosary at home. Although I was often participating with music or reading, I wasn't always fully present or understood the significance of the Mass. I was often there in body, but not really there in prayer or relationship with God. However, God used these experiences to put people in my path which would guide me closer to Him. In August 2015, after seeing a poster on Facebook for a day trip to Knock with a group of young women from around Ireland, I decided that I would go along. I had been to Knock before with my mum, but there was mostly older people, and wonderful and all as they were, I hadn't really enjoyed it much. However, I decided I would give it another go. When the bus arrived in Knock, I was very surprised to see hundreds of young people there. This was very different from my first experience. There was young people around in groups, praying the rosary, some were attending talks and some were going to confession. We went to a talk in the Adoration Chapel about the experiences of young people in Ireland and their faith. One striking moment for me was when everyone sang Our Lady of Knock at the end, with so much energy and joy. That evening, we attended Mass in the Basilica, which was packed with young people, where everyone was fully engaged in the liturgy, something I had not previously experienced. That day in Knock was the start of my transition from a childhood faith of my parents to my own personal relationship with Jesus. It was not long after this trip to Knock that one of my friends who was teaching in Dublin asked me if I would like to go on pilgrimage to Medjugorje with her and a few others at the Halloween midterm. I didn't have to think twice and said yes straight away. I had heard the different stories and I was curious to see what it was like. This was my first pilgrimage abroad and I was a little worried at the prospect of having to go to Mass every day and also the amount of prayer that would be required. I thought I'd be bored stiff. Keep in mind, at this stage at home, I was looking for the shortest Mass possible. I would often go to the back after receiving so that I could get out of the car park as quickly as possible. Little did I know what the Lord had in store for me that week in Medjugorje. After the 3-hour plane journey from Dublin to Dubrovnik, and the 3-hour bus trip along the beautiful Adriatic coast, we arrived in Medjugorje. As you drive into Medjugorje, the first thing that you see is the Chapel of St. James straight ahead, and it is a central place for Mass and celebrations. The first evening, I remember going to Mass. It was in Croatian, 2 hours long, and I had to sit on the floor because there were hundreds of people crammed into the chapel. This was a very different experience to what I was used to in Ireland, but surprisingly, I wasn't put off by it. As it was our first evening, we didn't have the radios which had the translation, so we had to try our best to follow along. One thing that I noticed was that even though everyone was from different countries and different places, they were all able to share the sign of peace, and they were all there for the same reason. The next struggle I had was the prospect of a holy hour, something I'd never been to before. I kept thinking to myself, how will I put this hour in, and what will I do to keep myself from falling asleep? Maybe I should have brought a Rubik's Cube with me. Like I said at the start, I have always prayed and had faith, but it's never been personal, and this was about to change. It was during that holy hour that I met Jesus as a friend for the first time. I was able to gaze in amazement at the monstrance and speak to him. As adoration started that night, I couldn't take my eyes off Jesus, and I found a great peace and didn't want it to end. The graces I received in that holy hour is what has led me to where I am today. I understood from that moment that Jesus is truly present to us, and that was the reason hundreds of people had gathered there so reverently. After this experience, Mass became real for me, and it was no longer about putting in the time. I started to enjoy going to Mass and really looked forward to the evening holy hour. Coming back to Ireland, I told most people I was on a sun holiday in Croatia, and nothing about the fact it was a pilgrimage. However, I had a longing to find what I experienced in Medjugorje in Ireland. I tried to find a holy hour locally, but there was none on, and I found it difficult to sit with Jesus without having any direction or music. I felt I could not be completely honest with my friends about my experience or my desire to go to Mass or adoration. I often denied my faith even to my Catholic friends. I eventually found it easier to be busy going running, baking, visiting friends and work, and drifted away again, only praying earnestly when I went on pilgrimage, which became quite often as I returned to Medjugorje on most of my holidays from work. Just before COVID closed down everything in 2020, I was at a prayer meeting one night in Dundalk. One of the hymns, "In God Alone My Soul Is at Rest," was played, and the words hit me like lightning. God had used the means of music, which was very familiar with me, to speak to my heart and remind me that I couldn't just have faith when I was on pilgrimage, and it needed to become part of my daily life. The next day, I knew I needed to go to confession, and I went to the Dominican church in Dundalk. This was the most honest confession that I had ever made, and I truly felt God's grace and mercy. The priest encouraged me to go and visit the image of the Divine Mercy, which was in the chapel, and to pray, "Jesus, I trust in you." In doing this, I was consoled again of the words, "In God alone, my soul is at rest." When COVID then closed everything down, my life became a lot quieter, and I had more time to think and reflect. I was disappointed that the churches were closed, and I wasn't able to get to Mass, but it was during this time that my newly awoken faith flourished. I started to go to the Dominican church in Dundalk in the evening and prayed the rosary. I had a lot of questions, and after a few evenings of being in the church, I got speaking with the priests there and had many of these questions answered with typical Dominican elegance and simplicity. For some time, I had had an à la carte style of faith, and I wanted this to change. Over time, I began to see that the beliefs of the Catholic Church are true. At the same time, I found Holy Family Mission on church services, and I started to watch the Mass and homilies, and found that the teaching here was very similar to that of the Dominicans. After the lockdown, I went to visit Holy Family Mission, and I was afraid a little because I still thought that maybe I would go to Mass and adoration and not take part in anything else, because they might be a cult. Or they might take the faith too seriously and actually pray on days other than Sunday. However, this view quickly changed when I arrived and realised that everyone here was normal and joyful and had such a true and personal relationship with Jesus. They had what I experienced in Medjugorje. So I decided to visit again later that summer, and I felt in prayer that the Lord was calling me to take a year out and spend it in Holy Family Mission. However, as a teacher with a house, a mortgage, a car, I didn't really think that this could be possible. So I went off and made a list of things that would need to happen in order for me to be able to apply. Through God's grace, one by one, the list became smaller, and I was able to come to Holy Family Mission this year. I have gone from someone throughout school and college who had a tick the box, do the minimum faith, to someone who now knows he deserves the maximum. The Lord has worked so much in my life so far, and I cannot wait to see the plans he has for my life in the future. As in the words of Jeremiah, for I know the plans I have for you, plans for you to prosper. Thank you for listening, and please continue to pray for us all here in Holy Family Mission, and we will keep you in our prayer.